Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. My name is Sana Mahmud, and I'm once again very happy to host an esteemed panel of extremely talented women with you here today on Right to Play's Facebook page. We are going to be furthering our discussion on the COVID pandemic, how it has affected sports and play activities, not only for us here in Pakistan, but also globally. So we are very excited to have an international panel with us who will share their experiences about their work during this crisis situation. My name, as I said, is Sana. I work as a project officer at Right to Play. I'm also an athlete, and everything I do revolves around sports. And I'm happy to be in a field where we work using sport and play as a tool to engage children in life skill development games and to empower children through the use of sports and play. Like the other organizations, our work was also very deeply affected during the COVID crisis and pandemic, and still continuing. And we are looking for ways on how to do sports and play-based activities in a safe manner so that children can get back to doing the things that they love, and we can go back to doing the things that we love as well, and seeing the joy on children's faces during sports. So I'm just going to start with a brief introduction of all our panelists. I have with us Lara Obeidat, who is the country director of Right to Play Jordan. She has extensive experience, over 16 years, working in program design, implementation, management, partnership development, and she has experience working in different countries in Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And most recently, she brings with her all that NGO experience and has led the Right to Play Jordan team to a great program, which we will hear from her soon. Sarah Stangle joins us all the way from Baltimore, Maryland, I believe. She is a program coordinator with Soccer Without Borders, which I will allow her to explain herself, what they all do and all the great work that she's doing. Sarah is also running a co-ed after-school program for 35 immigrant youth in the Baltimore County, and she supports girls' engagement in sports at both the middle and high school level, leads volunteer recruitment and other training efforts. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Lara, for joining us today. We also have with us Carol Bauer, who is the executive director of the Girls Athletic Leadership School. These, once again, are a very unique network of girls' high schools in the Denver area in the United States. And I will not try to do my part to explain what they do. I'll leave that to Carol. Carol, highly experienced, also has been on the board and founding teams of other such organizations that use sport to empower girls. We're very happy that Carol has joined us, even though it's very early in the morning for her where she is. And last but not the least, we have Nicole Matuska from Women Win Foundation. Women Win Foundation is a girls' empowerment organization that are also long-term partners of Right to Play Pakistan. We are happy to be working with them, both their Netherlands team and their U.S. team. And we're really happy that Nicole also has joined us today. Nicole has, she is leading the Women Win U.S.-based program with a background and over 10 years experience in this field of curriculum development, training, and running girls' empowerment programs. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to start
Thanks for having us here.
Great. I'm going to start with, I guess, Sarah. Just briefly, we'd want to know what exactly Soccer Without Borders does, and you know how you've been running your programs prior to the COVID crisis.
Sure. So Soccer Without Borders is an international nonprofit. We have 2 locations internationally and 5 sites across the U.S. And we use soccer as a vehicle for positive change to help newcomer youth overcome barriers to success. So when I say newcomer youth, that includes refugees, immigrants, and asylees. And what that looks like on a day-to-day is that we provide after-school or community-based soccer training opportunities for youth from the ages of primary school all the way through high school. And during that soccer training opportunity, we also provide English language support and academic support. So we really try to focus on the whole person, and we have a very specific ESL structure to our soccer practices. So we're working with the kids to improve their soccer skills, but most importantly, provide them with a safe space where they can build community and get to practice their English skills together.
Great, thank you. And then just for everybody and our Pakistani audience, was something that I always like to mention. Sarah is indeed talking about the sport of football, which we may commonly know as that, where it's called soccer in the United States. So just to clarify that for everybody, great to know about your program, Sarah, and I hope we will learn more about it. Carol, like I said, I've always been intrigued by the whole concept of these girls' athletic leadership schools. Would you also just briefly share with us what this network looks like and what your schools do? Sorry, we have the mute button that's always happens.
Always happens. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Carol Bauer. I'm the executive director of the Girls Athletic Leadership Schools of Denver. We are the first and only all-girls public schools in the state of Colorado. What we believe at Girls Athletic Leadership Schools is that if you have a body, you are an athlete. So we incorporate movement and play and physical wellness into our entire pedagogical model at our schools. So every day our students come together and start the morning with 45 minutes of movement, and then we incorporate movement into the teaching throughout the day of our middle school and high school. And we also have schools in Los Angeles, California, and Las Vegas, Nevada in the US. In addition to that, we also focus on social, emotional, and relational wellness of our girls as they're growing up through adolescence. And we do that with a positive gender focus. So really focusing on what it means to be a girl in the world, how to use your voice, how to advocate for what you need, and how to live a healthy, well-rounded life.
I think we can all take a lesson from that. If you have a body, you are an athlete. And I think that's just a great way to put it. So Nicole, just learning from you about the work that Women Win does. I know I am quite aware of it, and so is the rest of the Right to Play family. But it would be really interesting to know about what your programs look like and what does Women Win do globally.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. So Women Win's a little bit different in the sense that we do not do our own programs on the ground and have our own participants, but rather we support other organizations like Right to Play. We worked with Soccer Without Borders. Carol has been a part of our programs as well. We support other organizations to do the work that they're doing in a better and more effective way. So this ranges from, working with organizations like Right to Play to develop curricula, to fund their programs, to support staff training on particular programs. We, support organizations in doing international exchanges, which Carol and Sarah are part of, and other types of support in that sense, so they can do their work better. We were founded in 2007. And since then have probably worked with over 60 different local organizations in over 100 different countries around the world. And we support all types of sport. So whether it's football, basketball, netball, we've supported martial arts programs. We've had a surfing program we supported once, Zumba class, Zumba. We kind of have that same idea that if you're moving your body and you're being physically active, that's sport in some way, and play. So our three main thematic areas that we focus on through our programs are using sport to address gender-based violence in communities, helping girls access their sexual and reproductive health and rights, and being economically empowered. So basic financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and employability skills for girls. So all of our programs that we work with support girls in one of those three or a couple of those thematic areas.
Great. So if you're a girls empowerment program, you should reach out to Women Win, I guess.
Yeah, please do.
For their support. And lastly, and very excitingly, because we have very few chances now to interact with people physically, but very happy to see our teammate from Jordan join. Even though we know what Right to Play programs look like in Pakistan, very interesting to see how they've been doing in Jordan. So Lara, if you could please let us know what your programs focus on at Right to Play.
Thank you very much, Sana, for the introduction. As you know, Right to Play Jordan is part of Right to Play International. We were established in Jordan since 2006. Back then, we started working with children, mainly residing in refugee camps, UNRWA refugee camps. And then we had expanded our horizon to target more people in Jordan, to include Jordanians themselves and Syrian refugees. Our impact areas, Sana, in the Jordan program are two areas, and we've been, for the last 5 years, strategically speaking, highly involved in these two areas. The first one is the education, and the second impact area is a social inclusion and cohesion through promoting sports for development. It's an area where we implemented major programs in partnership with different international donors. We managed to work through these programs, which focused on sports for development, with focus on gender equality and promoting an opportunity for girls to be part of sports and to be not only to take part of the sport, rather to be leaders in that domain. And we had registered a number of success stories. This is in brief the Jordan program for the last 5 years. But as you know, in the upcoming years, we will expand our strategic impact areas to include, in addition to the areas I mentioned, protection and gender equality. Thank you, Sana.
Great. So without realizing it, we also have a very girls-focused panel and gender equality focus. And I think that only speaks highly of how important that subject is, and how we are all in the running for equality or leveling the playing field. Sarah, I'll come back to you. And since we're talking football and soccer and a full contact sport in that sense, how were your programs affected during the coronavirus crisis, and how were you able to, what were the immediate strategies or steps that you took to ensure that your participants were still engaged? And basically, how do you do football online?
That's a great question. So when the pandemic hit and we went into quarantine, all the schools were shut down, which meant we had no physical access to our students. So we very quickly organized across all of our Soccer Without Borders sites to develop something called the Stay Home Season, which basically meant that we were taking the competitive format of soccer and trying to create not something as equally as exciting, but something that could really keep the kids engaged and continue to give them that sense of being part of a team and being part of Soccer Without Borders, and continue to engage them in some sort of competition. So what that looked like was we divided basically all of our teams across all of our 5 domestic sites and also our 2 international sites in Uganda and Nicaragua, and divided them into brackets based on age and size of the team. And then those teams competed for 6 weeks in the Stay Home Season online virtually, which basically looked like 2 soccer practices via Zoom, so 2 virtual soccer practices a week, 1 virtual challenge that the kids could practice on their own time and compete and film themselves and submit to their coaches, and also some social emotional engagement and basic needs assessments. So the soccer portion of that, basically when you're coaching soccer virtually via Zoom, looks a bit like a home workout video, if anyone has ever done a home workout video. But we also had to get really creative, and I was really impressed with our coach's ability to come together quickly and say, how do we take this drill that we've been doing on the soccer field and convert it to something that we can do in our living rooms? Or how do we make this activity accessible for someone who doesn't have a soccer ball at home but still wants to get exercise? So it was a lot of small ball touches, little movements, little skills that really don't require a lot of space, but can still really improve your skills as a soccer player. In the first few weeks, we made sure that all of our kids had soccer balls. So we did soccer ball distribution to their homes so that they could participate in our practices. And then we also came up with creative, energizing exercises that, again, didn't require a lot of space or a soccer ball. And then we tried to maintain our ESL, English as a second language component of our sessions by coming up with little ESL games that we could practice via Zoom. So I think, like most of us on this call, probably we had to kind of do some research and figure out what are the best activities to do over a screen and to keep the kids interested and to just provide variety. So the stay home season lasted 6 weeks, and there were points awarded for each session for the number of students on each team that attended, and also individual awards for the most motivated student, the best participation, the best team player. And I think a big highlight of the stay home season was our ability, again, to collaborate across sites. So for example, when we were providing team challenges, such as see how many balls you can juggle in 1 minute, we might have one of our coaches in Colorado film himself doing that challenge, and then we'd share that challenge with our team. So it was exciting for our participants to get a chance to interact with other Soccer Without Border participants from other states and coaches that they hadn't met before. And it also allowed us the chance to really engage students who otherwise might not be getting to the field every practice. So I think the upside of the virtual engagement was that we were really able to focus, for example, on some of our girls who have a lot of responsibilities at home and otherwise were kind of marginal participants. But during the stay home season, as long as we were able to get them connected to our virtual sessions, they were able to continue to stay engaged. I should mention as well that a big part of our initial outreach during the beginning of the quarantine involved basic needs assessments and just really checking in with kids, making sure they had computers so they could connect to their classes, helping them connect to their teachers, making sure their families had enough food. So we really utilized that time to, again, be doing family outreach, making sure the students knew that we were there for them. I think our main mantra during quarantine and always, but especially became highlighted during the beginning of the pandemic, was that Soccer Without Borders is focused on creating inclusion and creating a sense of belonging. And that even when we can't be together physically, we can still remain together virtually and socially and emotionally. And so our focus was really on, even though we can't be together physically, how can we keep the kids engaged? And we came up with this creative way to have this cross-site competition. And I think it was really successful and the kids really enjoyed it. And yeah, that was the highlight.
that does sound exciting because you see these children sleeping in their online classes nowadays, and so I like the elements of motivation and how you've engaged them, maybe even added that aspect of competition by awarding points, and also doing that cross-site engagement. So you've taken Soccer Without Borders, the meaning to a whole new level, in a sense, using technology. But a very important point to highlight here is that technology does become very important to make sure that everybody can access those sessions. I think I'll move to Carol, and I think you might have a similar model, but because these are schools, there's not an after-school program, and so they might have been more disrupted. And so how did you make sure that there was not a pause in girls' education as well?
Thank you, Sana. Well, it was quite a shock as a school. We were given about 1 day notice before we were asked to close. And then a few days into the closure, we were told that we would come back virtually through the end of the year. So I think much like many schools across the U.S. and across the world, we had to first make sure all of our students had connectivity of some kind and had computers. So we did a lot of home deliveries of computers, about over 200 to our families, and also made sure families had what they need for the time at home. We also then had to redesign our entire academic platform to go from a very in-person, a very interactive pedagogy that we use to one that could translate over a computer screen, which it is really a very different feel and took students quite a bit of time to adjust to, I think. But as I said before, one of the core components of our school is physical wellness and movement and play. And we knew that we wanted to, above anything, hold true to our core values. And so when we moved from the in-person to the virtual platform, we did not back off on that whatsoever. So we immediately, students still, first thing in the morning, had movement together. And maybe somewhat like what Sarah said, we switched from having really a multimodal way of providing movement, from running to team sports to competitive games to dance to cardio workouts to yoga. And we moved all of those to a virtual platform. So we had students using just physical objects around the house, like books and cans of food that were used for weights. We did a series of classes that both focused on team skill-based things where you might use a ball, to yoga where you could really focus on your balance and your flexibility as a student. And so that happened right away. We also, at the end of the school year, or throughout the school year, focus on teaching students what it is to be part of healthy competition and what that looks like and what you need to be successful there. And so every year we have competition, and the girls' athletic leadership schools often goes by GALS, so the short name for it. So instead of the Olympics, we have the Galympics. So we did not back down from that. We created our teams and still had a super fun, healthy competition of Galympics at the end of the year last year that we were really proud of. But in addition to that, we do have athletic teams at our schools, formal athletic teams. Those seasons were canceled, but we still also focused on bringing those teams together to do the different elements of what it means to be part of a team, which is the athletic component, but it is also the social learning component of that as well. So we continued to meet as teams to develop skills over the internet together, and really to push girls to remember that even though they may feel alone or isolated in their own homes and not interacting with others, that there was a way that they could do that, and that they could do that through sport.
No, I think we might have lost Sana, our host. Maybe I could just go next while she keeps going. Is that okay, Lara, or would you like to go?
No, please go on,
Okay.
Nicole. I guess
Yeah.
her internet connect.
Yeah, no worries. So Women Win, again, oh, there she is. Women Win operates slightly differently in the sense that we didn't necessarily have to make all of these adjustments in terms of reaching participants, but we really had to adjust in the type of support we offered our partners, who they themselves had to adjust quickly. And so, our model of work typically involves, funding sports programs. So funding organization, providing, financial resources for organizations to run sports programs, as well as doing in-person training. So we would, often travel around the world with some of our trainers and host a training with organizations in different parts of the world. Clearly with COVID, both of those things, stopped happening. Travel stopped, as well as sports programs stopped. So a couple of things that we did. One was shifting our funding, rather than providing organizations kind of funding that had to be directed towards on the field sports. and life skill sessions, we actually provided organizations with really flexible funding for what they needed during this pandemic and emergency, whether it was hygiene kits for their players, extra data for their internet connections at the office so that they could continue connecting with their participants if that was the case. Just core support for the organization to keep staff on board. We know a lot of smaller organizations were really struggling to even stay open during this pandemic because some donors and funders maybe pulled their funding out or stopped their funding because sports wasn't happening. So what we really did was shifted how we supported the organizations from a funding perspective to continue keeping their doors open, to continue to keep operating. That was one. And then we also supported organizations in creating resources and co-developing resources that they could use during this pandemic while young women and girls were quarantined and in lockdown. So some of those included comic books about really important key life skill issues for girls like menstruation, depression, and mental health. With local storytellers and local comic book artists, we helped create a series of comic books that partners could distribute to the girls at their homes, and the girls could continue reading these comic books about sport and some particular life skill topic that was really important and still engage in some of those conversations. We also created activity books for girls to do related to some of these life skill topics, as well as helping partners create kind of online videos, kind of what Sarah and Carol were talking about, online videos to get girls engaged in kind of movement classes, helping coaches film those videos and do those movement classes, and provided the funding for partners to be able to transition that way too. So it was, our shift was really kind of supporting our partners in whatever they needed to get through this time and to just be more resilient as an organization. And then our training kind of has shifted too. So now instead of thinking about our training and support as in person with our partners and traveling around the world, we've really looked at how can we, through online platforms, support the training of our partners and coaches on the field. So that's actually been really great because it's, I think, a more sustainable way of working than, sending out our trainers physically. It's very expensive. It takes a lot of time, and this new world that we're living in, that might not always be as possible. So I think it's opened up, despite all the obstacles I think that we've faced as a society during this pandemic, I think it's opened up a lot of really fascinating opportunities as well for making our work better and more efficient, and for Women Win to be a better partner to our partners on the ground.
I think that, Nicole, thanks for sharing, but you have to do a better job of providing me support because I'm the one who got dropped out of this this online discussion. So we were just talking about the importance of technology, and that has been a real challenge also, to make sure everybody has working internet connections and everybody has access to smartphones or tablets. I've just demonstrated that. But thank you for sharing your work and your organization's experiences during this time. Going to Lara, I must mention that the Jordan team has been really praised for their great work during this time in the entire Right to Play international system as well. So I'd really like to hear about how they have sustained their program.
Sana, thank you very much, actually. And allow me first to give a bit of a background about what took place in Jordan in terms of the COVID-19 as a background. So Jordan as a country had, when we started facing the COVID-19 crisis, that was back in mid-March 2020. So the government itself had imposed a very restricted lockdown, one of the strictest lockdown that took place globally speaking, in order to ensure stating the health status of its people as at the forefront of its priorities. And such a strict lockdown had imposed a complete school closure. Students had to move from like in a 10 days, in almost 2 weeks, from a normal class setup into a classroom setup into a complete distance learning experience. The teachers, all the educational system, etc. In addition, there were only just essential sectors allowed to open in Jordan, including the pharmaceutical sector, the education, the medical sector, and the food production industry. Given that background, we at the Right to Play office in Jordan, we had to move to home-based work modality, and we started aligning and trying to look into our business continuity and how we will still serve the children of Jordan in both thematic areas, sports for development and education. And from there, our story starts. And it started with us designing an online social media campaign. And this social media campaign included that back then physical activity videos, which were filmed by a smartphone, and the one who delivered these videos is a very professional team member who is a sport for development professional. And then we moved to start discussing with the Ministry of Education to learn in Jordan here, to learn about their priorities and the gaps and how Right to Play can support in that aspect. We showed them the samples of our physical activity videos. They loved the content of these physical activities, and they asked us to start producing physical activity videos to be part of the distance learning that has been broadcasted nationwide on their national TV. They had 3 national TV platforms as a Ministry of Education. So we started supplying them with these physical activity videos on a weekly basis, and they used to be repeated on a daily basis 3 times a week. The whole concept of these physical activity videos and why Ministry of Education had encouraged such a contribution is and introduced that to the distance learning school schedule was the fact that they wanted to insert an extracurricular activity that support children to stay in encouraging positive coping mechanisms as one aspect, and to encourage the movement, because as you mentioned earlier, children had to move completely from being very interactive into a setup where they sit in front of a laptop or a smartphone and start getting their lessons. And these physical video activities were addressing children from age 6 till age 18. And through these videos, we had reached, as Right to Play Jordan and Right to Play internationally, I would say, about 1,404,000 students in Jordan, including Jordanians, refugees, Palestinians, and Syrians. This has been a great experience for us at a country level, and we could say now that we contributed to the physical activity of children during that crisis, because as you know, it was a stressful experience on elderly people. So what about children themselves? Such an experience also had increase the trust of Ministry of Education in our products and the content that we are delivering. And currently in the recovery phase, we are producing educational videos which are considered as an extracurricular activities to enhance the national curriculums, and it's also broadcasted on the National Ministry of Education TV channels. Honestly speaking, we at Right to Play Jordan, we are very proud of this partnership with the Ministry of Education, and that they gave us the chance and the opportunity to contribute, trusting our efforts, and we are still continuing with this effort. This is our story in Jordan. And I believe we are still working on increasing this, because apparently the COVID crisis is not ending. Now, although the schools opened on the 1st of September, now effective from today, the school are back to distance learning. So it seems that the blended learning model is the upcoming approach that we all need to adapt to in order to keep children educated and empowered by education. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, Lara, because indeed it is a real success to incorporate your programs into the Ministry of Education's work and have it broadcasted on national television. But what is the actual impact on physical education, and what are the government's or the authorities' views on if schools even reopen? how much focus are they willing to give to sport and play programming? Because a lot of children's academics has suffered in this time. So what
Absolutely.
is it looking like, or what is the weightage given to sport and play activities?
You mean in the context of Jordan?
Yeah.
And from a governmental perspective, like from the Minister of Education perspective, I would tell you now they are giving it a priority because it's considered to be like an instrumental factor to coping mechanism and introducing positive attitudes. So at this stage, they are giving it a bigger attention in terms as since it's very instrumental, as I mentioned, to introduce positive attitudes, because what we are undergoing now, globally speaking, and Jordan-wise, is a crisis by itself. So it's given that importance, and they are asking us to now create a long-term plan of cooperation with them to see how we can maintain it. Yet we need to apply all the safety measures in terms of social distancing and all of these aspects. As you know, Sana, this experience is a very new experience to the whole world. So we are adapting, yet it's given now a higher importance given how it is introducing positive attitudes to children. And this is what we are trying, what we will be navigating in the upcoming phase with the Ministry of Education.
Great. And Carol, as just, as an executive director of essentially an educational institute, I'm also want to hear from you. How important do you think sport will play a role in now, especially in this time? And whether your focus as an organization will be to complete girls' curriculum, educational curriculum, or will it also be to focus on the movement aspect of your work?
Yes, thank you for that question. I really was agreeing with so much of what Lara was saying about young people's health and wellness during this time of the pandemic. I think what we've seen in our school and certainly across our state and across the country is that it's very, very difficult for students, especially young people as they're growing in adolescent development. One of the core things that they need is social interaction with other young people their age. And so really getting up in the morning and sitting in front of a computer for 5 to 6 to 8 hours has taken a real toll on students, I think, across the country and across the world. It's very, very difficult. I think in the spring, when it was an anomaly and it was new, I think folks just pushed their way through it and it was fine. I think this fall, sort of that mental aspect of like, oh, we have to come back in this way and do it again. And I don't get to interact with other kids. I don't get to interact with adults has really, really taken a toll on young people's health. Like I said, I think the number one thing that we are hearing from our families and from parents is that they are so, so grateful for the physical development and the sport and play aspect of our pedagogy at our school, because if it were not for that, not only in the morning doing movement as a way to start the day, but also throughout the day that's incorporated into lessons in math, in science, in language arts. It's helping them kind of keep that positive attitude, keep those that energy going, and has been a real critical piece. And so we've heard from parents that if their student did not have that aspect of the day, they think their students would really be a lot more sad, a lot more depressed, a lot lower energy, and not as willing to sit down and engage in their schoolwork. So we really 100% believe it is so important, not only for students, but also for adults. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that. I think adults can get in their heads that they're super busy and they couldn't possibly leave their desk for the entire day, but really thinking about taking breaks and keeping that balance to create wellness for yourself is really going to help you in everything that you do.
Especially, and I think all of us can relate to that. Lara, you were going to add?
Yes, actually, adding to the fact that I believe, Sana, that sport and the engagement of children in sport, especially after this crisis, maybe the approach will be different, but the content will remain as is, So instead of having like 10 children together, maybe it will be reduced to 5 children. But we are still navigating this modality because the nature of this virus is not clear yet, globally speaking. So we are still navigating what is the best approach to keep the children safe themselves and yet movable, able to move and to keep themselves interacting with each other. At this stage, we are running a couple of online trainings for under sport for development. We are still, I would tell you, we are still piloting the experience itself to see how it will, what will be lessons learned, and where there will be successes and where there will be challenges. Yet I can tell you, just from the couple of trainings that have been run in the Jordan office for one of our sport for development projects, my colleagues are facing difficulties of training them on the technical skills themselves, training the trainees on the technical skills of sports for development. But I truly believe that there will be always a way where we humans can navigate and create innovative solutions around it. So I won't say I'm positive actually on that note.
And I think that's the only way to survive, by being positive.
Indeed. Yes.
Actually, just taking that, what Lara said, just a step further, Sarah, we're always talking about, and we're always advocating to children about, less screen time, and, you need to take a break from your smartphones or your tech devices, and then go out on the field and sweat it out. How do you see football being modified, as Lara mentioned, maybe less in number, or when in-person activities are safe to begin? You can also share the experience of your community in your hometown, what it looks like. But here in Pakistan, we are going towards opening and reopening of schools. And so how do you see football being modified as a sport from your experience in the organization?
Sure. So actually, we've had a bit of success with we actually did the summer start. We got to the point with COVID within our community and across our domestic sites here, where we were in a moderate risk phase, which means we were able to start some small in-person programming. And it was a great success this summer, and we're continuing this fall with the same model. And what that looks like is we are doing neighborhood-based, what we call pods or cohorts of students. So small groups no larger than 10 students. We are not allowed to provide transportation, so we're meeting them in their local communities, in their neighborhoods, on fields or playgrounds, anywhere where we can bring a group together near their homes so they can walk there. And we've put in place several safeguarding measures to make sure that it's safe, that everyone's staying healthy, that the parents are on board, local administrations are on board, and that we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're engaging the kids in a safe and healthy way. And so what that looks like is when the students arrive for practice, we spray everyone's hands with hand sanitizer. Masks are required for coaches and players at all times. Players and coaches are required to stay 6 feet apart as much as possible. And we sanitize all of our equipment. Only coaches are allowed to touch the equipment, which has been an interesting habit to shift, because we really had the kids in the habit of helping us set up and being very involved in practice. But now with COVID, we're kind of restricting what they can and cannot do on the field. And then we worked across our SWB, Soccer Without Borders sites again, with all of our colleagues and coaches to come up with 25 activities for physical distance practice. So we have team building activities, soccer drills, and fitness activities that have been modified to ensure that the students, the players, while playing, keep a distance from each other. So it is interesting. It's very different than a normal soccer practice, but you'd be surprised to find out how many soccer drills and physical fitness drills you can do at a safe distance. So for example, soccer tennis, or soccer foursquare, or passing. There's a lot of passing drills that don't involve physical contact. Unfortunately, we're not really able to work on any defensive drills where students are approaching each other, players are approaching each other. We're not able to practice the game itself. We're not able to scrimmage, so we don't have any matches, which has been a disappointment for all of us. But I think the kids are just so thrilled to be back in person with their friends outside running around. We take frequent breaks so that we can all spread out enough to take our masks off, because it is really difficult to be running around and getting exercise while wearing masks, but it's also really important for our program to continue in a safe way, that everyone wear their masks. And we've even gotten to the point where now that the kids are back in school, we're able to do some academic support on the field with hotspots and laptops, and again, wearing masks at a safe distance. But we're really trying to take advantage of our safeguarding structure in place to provide as much in-person activity and opportunity as possible. But again, it's much different than what they're used to. Our programs at one point, one of our middle school programs was 70 students, and now we're again working with just 10 students at a time with 2 coaches, so that one coach can be coaching and the other can be kind of reasserting those safeguarding measures. But it's been very successful, as I said, and I think the most important thing is, as you mentioned, the kids are on their screens all day. They're just totally from, I think, 8 to 3 p.m. just on the computer in class. So to have the opportunity after school to come out to a field to get fresh air, to run around, to physically interact with their friends and their coaches has been such a huge step forward for us. And as long as local and state and national guidelines continue to allow for small group in-person gatherings, we will continue. Hopefully we can continue on this course. We'll see what happens with COVID, but for now it's been a very different type of soccer or football, but a very, very successful.
At least they get to come on the ground after so many hours on the screen. Nicole, coming to you, since you have experience working and managing programs across the world, I want to hear, as Lara said, any innovation that you've seen, that you've come across, that you think would be valuable to share and that everybody could benefit from, ways that people have been doing sports in a creative manner. We've heard an example of how soccer is being done now safely, but in person. What about other sports or other programs that you know of that may have done something creatively?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think kind of the solutions that the panelists have mentioned are similar to the ones being used internationally. I know a lot of the programs that we're working with and the communities that we work with don't have a lot of access to internet. So that's honestly been probably the biggest obstacle, is although maybe coaches and the organizations have that access, the participants themselves, the adolescent girls, you know, are in homes where there is no internet connection. Maybe they have a, you know, smartphone, maybe not. Usually it's the family shares a smartphone and, you know, are all kind of sharing it for school related issues, and the caregivers or guardians use it for their purposes as well. And it just kind of floats around and rotates around family members. So, you know, I guess the biggest innovations that we've seen are, you know, yes, using tech platforms, but more so is how to kind of what Sarah was talking about, how to do smaller pods of young people in these programs, and using those pods as ways of connecting those young people. So in places where the lockdown has lifted or relaxed a bit, we've seen some partners doing really cool things with bringing you know, local coaches to those neighborhoods. Girls can walk to a central location or meet in the front of somebody's house, maybe groups of 5. And, you know, one of our partners has actually been able to get tablets for these young coaches, then to run the curricula or to run a sport practice using the tablet as a support, because also a lot of the coaches, you know, are young people themselves and maybe don't have the right training to modify all of these games and activities on the fly like that. So our partners have been using kind of tablets, distributing tablets to get access to for girls on the internet, but also in smaller kind of physical pods. So that's one way we've been able to see some of these, you know, programs continue doing their work, although at a smaller scale than before. Before they'd reach maybe 100 girls at a school site. Now it's maybe 5 girls in this neighborhood, 5 in that. And So that's one way. And honestly, during this lockdown, I know, sports and movement is important, but I think one of the most important things for a lot of our partners was just connection. So connecting in any way. And, some of our partners where girls are a bit more connected online, we're able to do like Instagram movie nights together with the participants in their programs. Any way to get, girls to come together somehow and just still feel a part of a team. I know Carol mentioned just the importance of feeling what it feels like to be part of a team. And especially if you're being socially isolated and sometimes, girls were in homes that weren't that safe for them and going to the sport practice was sort of their safe space and being able to physically get out of that dangerous space. And now that wasn't possible, that trying to connect with them in some way and letting them know that we're still here for you. You are still part of a team. And that's very important. And you have someone to talk to was absolutely important. So our partners did a lot of really creative ways to do that. They would train often some of the, door-to-door health workers that went around to talk about COVID protocols and COVID safety. They would train them to look for signs of gender-based violence, look for signs of depression in young people as well that were part of their programs. So that was kind of a joint training, a joint collaboration between local health departments and some of our partners who had expertise in gender-based violence. So just things like that. I think the biggest thing we've seen is just partners really desperately trying to find ways to continue connecting to the girls, whether it was through sport and physical movement or just like, hey, you have someone to talk to, you're still part of this team.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And for grownups as well, just that connection when you're living in lockdown. I think just quickly with Carol also, it's very interesting that she mentioned gender-based violence. And I was going to talk about child protection issues and with things shifting online. With you, it's you might have trusted staff, but, have you had these challenges or was that something that came up during all of your modified programming? And how do you see that shaping into the future, and how much access should these young girls have with the people that they work with instructors, and whether that poses them at a new risk of gender-based violence or cyberbullying?
Yes, I think that we serve a huge diversity of students. And one of the other aspects of our school is that we have a team of licensed psychotherapists on staff. So we have a team of mental health supports that support not only girls, but also family members who are dealing with different issues. I think sadly and difficultly, like it is true that school is a very safe haven for many, many students. It's a quiet place. It's a place free of violence. It's a place where they can focus. It's a place where they can access mental health supports, where they can access food, where they can access friendship and compassion. And so I think that we absolutely are seeing that as well. One of the things that we have just applied to do with our school district is open up as a remote learning support center. So it's really like a library or an internet cafe where, although we're not delivering instruction live at our school, we are opening up our building so that students and sometimes family members in very small groups with a lot of health restrictions can come into that space to at least log on and do school from school, even though it is virtual. And that is really important. We see a lot of our students became caregivers in their families to other siblings or cousins, and that's difficult for them to focus on school or on academics, and or just live in a place that isn't free of violence, and it isn't a place where you can really focus on academics. And so yeah, we definitely have seen that and feel lucky to be able to open up to provide that space. That's coming very, very soon. But again, I think what I heard, I think Lara say that kids went back to school, but now they're going back virtually. I think that's something that we're all worried about as well. Like what types of groups can we bring back into schooling in a very safe way without then, having to stop that because of the pandemic spread. So, but that is an absolute need, that a safe place, not just a safe place to play, but also a safe place to be, and a place where they can access all the supports they need is really been something that we've seen not only in Colorado, but across the country.
I agree with this fear of the second wave and people going back. Lara, I just want to also ask whether you had a chance to gauge the effectiveness of the physical activity videos, or how would you, in your opinion, say that they are different from in person? Because, like you said, we don't know enough about this disease, and it may continue, and the lockdown may be delayed. So what do you see as the future of physical education and physical activity, and how effective have these videos been in sustaining that?
Thank you, Sana. Generally speaking, I believe we need to be a bit realistic. I think like the whole world is now reshaping its approaches. Generally speaking, it's either in education, support for development, the protection, as you mentioned, Carol, because I completely agree with you. The school was a peaceful haven for many children around the world. Therefore, let's be now realistic. We are still inside the crisis, and we are still trying to be survival on that note, relatively speaking. Now, in terms of assessing the assessment of the physical activity videos, Sana, as you know, and because Right to Play has the approach of being an evidence-based organization, we decided at a country level with the support from the global team is to develop a measurement tool to assess I won't say the impact, because there is no impact in such activities. It was under emergency or crisis management, but to assess if the children found these physical videos really useful or not. So we had developed a measurement tool. With the support of Ministry of Education, they shared it with a sample of children from age 6 till age 12, and we are still, Sana, in the process of evaluating and analyzing the outcomes and the answers of the children. Yet it was a nationwide type of a survey, so we received responses from across the country from children in that age group, even Syrian refugees. We are in the phase of analyzing, but I would say, and this is informal, that children were positive about the physical video activities, and most of the responders were girls, by the way, who found it really useful for them to keep them physically engaged and moving, and let them feel a bit of, I won't say happiness, but just like positive. And surprisingly, as I said, the sample size was around 1,200 students. The majority of the responders were girls, from the spectrum of age group I provide you with. So initially speaking, they found it interesting, positive. It helped them to physically move. So this gives us an indication that we ourselves, Right to Play, we need to continue in this activity. And I would take it from a gender perspective to say that it is positive that it managed to reduce the stress on girls, because usually girls are more on the front of major challenges, even at a household level, as you know.
Yes, agreed. And as we come to the closing of this session, thank you for sharing all of these valuable thoughts with us about your modified programming. I just again would like to briefly hear from anybody, if any of the panelists, what you think very briefly will our futures look like? Will your organization's future look like? Will the future of sport-based programming look like? And what is one thing innovative, or one thing that you feel like we learned during this phase and we should carry that forward? So I'll start with Sarah.
I think the thing that stands out to me is that there are so many ways to give a child a sense of belonging and a sense of community, and that it doesn't stop at the soccer field. It doesn't stop when they all go home, and that for us, this time has been a really impactful time to get to know the whole child, the whole person, their experience at home, their academic experience, their family experience, and to get to know the families more. And I think this is really an opportunity for us, again, to focus on utilizing sport as a space to combat isolation and really focus on that, and the importance of belonging, creating inclusion, and that can look different and creative and can evolve and will continue to evolve, and that there are so many creative ways to do that, so that moving forward, if we are struggling to get someone to the field, we know that we can continue to engage them in other ways.
Great. And Nicole, what about you? How do you see the future for sports programming?
Yeah, I think at the start of all of this, the sector, the sport for development sector, I think was actually really scared that sport could become sidelined as we transition through this pandemic and come out of this, kids having missed school, so many health, the health crisis, all these, really big issues were kind of dominating the conversation, and sport could be, if we didn't act as a sector together, to be seen as sort of a frivolous exercise. Why focus on sport when there's so many more important things, to focus on? And I think what we've seen is really the sector come together and really make the case that no, actually, just what Sarah was saying, sport is so important in creating that sense of community and belonging and addressing rights-based issues for young people as they transition through this period, and for supporting just the mental health and well-being that, this crisis that we're going to go through now. And as we come out of this, of young people, that sport is absolutely the best platform to do that, and can really support other ways of doing it as well. So I think one thing we've learned is, that's one thing, is that we really need to advocate for this as a sector and as a community, because if not, sport can very easily be, considered not important. And then the other thing Women Win as an organization really kind of came out of this is, and this is something we've always tried to do, obviously, as an organization, but really listening to our partners who, have absolutely the expert knowledge of what they need to do to get through this, and supporting them as best as we can. I think, we've really kind of seen that everything is so different in so many different cultures and communities and contexts that there is no kind of solution that will work for everyone. And if we don't work locally and work with local expert knowledge in finding solutions, that we're just going to do more harm. So for us as an organization, we've really tried to, as best as we can, support our partners and really learn from that local knowledge of what's working and support that.
Great. Carol, just some last thoughts on what key points and takeaways you see for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that both Sarah and Nicole really hit the big things. One is that the need for young people to feel included and part of something bigger than themselves is totally huge for their social, emotional, academic, and physical wellness. So finding some outlet for that. I think what Nicole said about how physical movement and sport and all of the things that brings is absolutely important, not only for young people during development, but also for us as adults. I think we need to remember that too. So as folks were speaking, the biggest thing that I was thinking is, please, remember that we also as adults need to take care of ourselves. We need to be physically active. We need to keep our own sanity in order to really support our young people in that positive adolescent development and positive youth development. So the final thing I would say is, figure out how to do it, whatever works for you, but you need to keep moving.
Great. And lastly, where are we seeing Right to Play Jordan after immense success going with their programming, and what are the key elements that you would take?
Now we need to strategize on these two aspects that we've been working on, the physical activity videos and distance learning. This is one factor, and even the educational videos that we are providing to ministry. So we want to strategically define and create a position for Right to Play Jordan in that aspect countrywide. This is one aspect. In terms of sport for development, I believe it is a necessity. It's not a privilege. And I believe humans, as long as they are advocating and keep believing in what they are doing, so they can keep maintaining the sport. But maybe what will be new to to sports, generally speaking, is the fact of social distancing. I'm familiar with the fact that football cannot be done with social distancing, but I trust humans to be always innovative and creating ways and modalities that to keep them strive above adversity and all of these challenges. So for us, we will continue. Apparently, distance learning is the new normal that is taking place globally speaking and Jordan-wise. So we need to adapt to this new normal regardless.
And let's figure out a new normal way of playing sports. So maybe you will see us on Zoom having a volleyball game together. Who knows, right?
I don't know, honestly, like I try to imagine it, but there will be a way through. Trust me.
I'm with Lara on this, and I'd like to believe in the positive. With that very positive and very energetic note, thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And once again, our hearts do go out to all the people affected by the coronavirus, whether it was economically, emotionally, socially. There have been ways that this has caused a lot of trauma to people, loss of life, loss of health, and isolation in general. So, once again, we understand the impact of that, and empathize with all the people who have suffered. And we, as a group, as Right to Play, with our partners and with our strong proponents in the same field of sport for development, continue to strive to make the lives of young children and young people and children better by using sports as a tool to empower them and to look after their mental and psychosocial well-being. So thank you, everybody, for your experience and for your time. Hope to see you on Zoom or in person whenever time allows.
Thank you, Sana.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sana.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.